I think I turned it on.
Oh yes, it's recording. Okay, so good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first stakeholder workshop online. So this morning we are going to talk about memory politics and war situations and violent conflicts. And this is just the first one of a series of 3 events. So we will have another event tomorrow about museums and another event on Friday about civil society and managing the memories of conflicted territories. So this is a project called Distermem, which is led by the University of Bath with 7 partners from 4 countries, or 5 now, which are Poland, Lithuania, Armenia, Pakistan, and the United Kingdom. So we are very happy to see many of you this morning, and we would like to invite you to follow us, to look at our website and look up our research if you are interested. We are organizing a conference. We haven't published the call yet, but it is imminent in the next few days, so it will be published on the website as well. And we have also the 2 more events. So if you go on the website, you can see these, and you can also attend these if you are interested, or you can share with other people. And we would really like to hear from you. So this is a stakeholder workshop because we would like you to participate and as much during the event and as afterwards by sending us feedback and letting us know about your similar interests and your research. So we have a questionnaire which has been popped into this chat, but I will repost it a bit later on again. And I would like to hand it over now to the chairs of the event.
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you for this introduction. Yes, we would like to welcome you all very warmly to this panel on the politics of memory and war. Welcome our honorable speakers, 3 out of 4 now, and all the audience members. We're happy to see so many of you. We're co-chairing this panel together with Małgorzata Łukianow, and my name is Tomasz Orawski, and we're both from the Center for Research and Social Memory, based at the Faculty of Sociology at the University of Warsaw, and of course we're part of this Distermem project. And we prepared this panel because wars are here again. So contrary to the predictions of optimists who claimed, and we all know this story since the early 1990s, that after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, we are facing the end of history and therefore the end of wars. But today we know already not only that wars and violent conflicts have not disappeared, but we are experiencing that they are re-intensifying in Europe and beyond. So it seems important to look more closely at the contemporary dynamics of this relationship between memory politics and violent conflicts, including wars. Of course, memory politics have been dealing for decades with the memories of wars, commemorations, anniversaries, reconciliation processes, peace building and peacekeeping, and so on. And thanks to this, we learned a lot, right? About the mechanisms of constructing the images of the enemy, about the institutionalization of collective victimhood, about death and mourning as tools of politics of memory, about the various ways of instrumentalizing the past by the politicians and so on. However, here in the 21st century, there is still much new to say, because now some new factors seem to appear, seem to influence the shape of this dynamics between memory politics and war. Because today we are observing wars taking place on a global stage more than ever before, right? Because they involve transnational and intergovernmental networks of organizations and other actors. Wars became a global events in a strict sense of the word. We're also observing an unprecedented acceleration of the a flow of real-time information through digital media. We are witnessing a very far-reaching fabrication of historical narratives. We are also seeing important shifts in the way warfare as such is conducted. For example, through the large scale of new war technologies, such as drones, such as artificial intelligence used for the war purposes, etc. And last but not least, we are observing what choices scholars face in countries that are directly involved in conflicts, right? So this is often a choice between whether to go on the to the front of the battle for remembrance, that is to serve the state and the nation, so let's say, or try withstanding the pressure of the state institutions, the pressure of the politicians and society, and continuing research in a relatively non-involved academic way. So in short, what I would like to say for this quick opening is that today we, as scholars, practitioners, stakeholders, activists, we are all facing two important challenges. And the first one, I believe, is to understand how to make sense of the rapidly changing relationship between memory, politics, and war in this world of today, where antagonistic memories grow rapidly and they fuel mutual hostility and hatred between communities. This is the first challenge. And the second challenge is that we need to think how to effectively break down antagonistic modes of remembrance, how to break them down and direct memory politics, think of ways of directing memory politics towards developing more inclusive models of understanding the past. So the first challenge is like strictly intellectual. The second one is more practical, more politically involved. Yes, so this is what I wanted to say. So this is just a general framework for today, and our honored speakers from different countries. We already have 4 out of 4 because Mudassir joined us as well. They are all with us, and they will share their detailed expertise with us. So I now give the floor to my co-chair, Małgosia. Małgosia, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for introducing me. So I will have the pleasure to introduce the speakers before their presentation, but before we proceed to that, just 1 or 2 words about the housekeeping rules for today. So each presentation should take around 15 minutes. And I will be enrolled to just remind you of the passing time, and knowing the way Zoom works, that when you share your screen, you don't screen either the time on your computer or the participants. So apologies in advance when I will step up and just remind you about 2 and 1 minutes that are left. So that's for it. In case there were questions, so we can write them in the chat during the session as well. And now, without any further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for today, Alcin Hakobian, who is the Senior Research Fellow at the Department of Contemporary Anthropological Studies at the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography. Alcin Hakobian received his PhD in Social and Cultural Anthropology from the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography of the National Academy of Sciences of Armenia. And he's a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute and also an Associate Professor at Yerevan State University. He has received several scholarships and fellowships and has conducted research at the universities of Cambridge, Freiburg, Marburg, Tübingen, and Angers. His research interests include the anthropology of violence, refugee studies, memory and diaspora studies, ethnicity, the Caucasus, and the Middle East. And he's the co-author of Beyond the Karabakh Conflict, the Story Village Exchange with his co-authors Husseinova and Rumyantsev. So, Alcin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for presentation, and I would like my PowerPoint. It's okay.
you need to share again your
Okay.
presentation because we can't see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thomas said about challenges, and we face it during our research because we live in the situation of the war. And before the Nagorno-Karabakh war, we can say about like memory policy, about monuments, etc., etc. But the war in Armenia and also in Ukraine, in the Eastern Europe, changed everything because we live in the situation of war. And always we face by the past of the symbols, etc., etc. That's why the war gives opportunity to understand how the past is working during the contemporary violence, conflict, and the war. The other hand, how the past using justification for the violence. In this question, I would like to present in my presentation, in my talk. I would like to mention that before the Karabakh War, I did research about Syrian war with my Italian colleagues, Marcello Molica, and we published a book, an English book about Syrian war and Armenian community based on the memory. How the memory become a language to understand the Armenian perception of the Syrian war. And the logic continuation of this kind of research is Nagorno-Karabakh war, second Nagorno-Karabakh war, and now I'm involved to do research about war research about how it took place during the war, cultural dimension, memory, and etc., etc., from anthropological point of view. I would like to continue explain three dimensions of the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, and which I would like to present it. It is space, transnationalism, and memory. You see the map of Nagorno-Karabakh before the conflict. It's Soviet autonomous region created by early Soviet period by Joseph Stalin as an Armenian region inside of Azerbaijan as autonomous region. And during the late Soviet period, the Karabakh movement that started and fastly become the violence conflict. And we have first Nagorno-Karabakh war. He ended by victory of Armenian side. And we have second Karabakh war. He ended by victory of Azerbaijani. But we have a different kind of war, and I can talk about that. And the other, the Karabakh conflict started in the end 1988 when the Armenian of Nagorno-Karabakh, not on Armenians, Nagorno-Karabakh had a separate units, autonomous units. The local parliament decided to ask Moscow, Baku, and Yerevan to solve the problem belonging of Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia, because Armenian perceived that they had discriminated by Soviet Azerbaijan and cultural, language right, etc., etc. And after the conflict fastly become violence because in the February 1988, the Armenian pogroms, Sumgayit town in Azerbaijan, took place, and it was mass ethnic violence during the Soviet period, the first mass ethnic violence. And it's interesting in terms of memory because these pogroms perceived the Armenian side as a continuation of genocide. Why continuation of genocide? Because this perception was based in the fear of collective memory, because it was collective violence against Armenian collective identity. That's why it perceived as a continuation of genocide, and Armenian resistance during the First Karabakh War constructed a dichotomy between resistance and genocide memory. It's very interesting, it's very important issue was, and because the violence was constructed like genocide and resistance. In the symbolic term is materialized in the genocide memorial. The first victim of Armenian pogrom was buried, and also in the naming of the Armenian irregular military units during the conflict, like Fidains, it's the Armenian partisan during Ottoman periods who resist Ottoman genocide policy. And the early Armenian militants was called also Fidains, like Hajduk, and the face also, people would like to have the similar face like Armenian Fidei during the Ottoman Empire. It was the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, and we in 2020 we have the second Karabakh war. In the theoretical frame of my research, now I would like to mention it's ongoing research. I continue to do research. Space, I understand the urban space because urban setting is widely identified as a hubs the cultural ethnic interaction and challenging took place. And during the Nagorno-Karabakh war, we have the several key points of urban spaces. It's like Baku, Stepanakert, in the diasporic Shushi and diasporic Armenian community also. And urban space created the narrative and practice also related to memory and the war. And we say about collective memory. We had a lot of work about collective memory and policy of memory policy. It's huge issue, and we can using this kind of research to understand how the memory and using as a target during the conflict and how the memory become justification of violence. On the other hand, the anthropology of legitimation and legitimacy. Why? It's because the memories legitimize different kind of violence and different kind of post-war situation also. And we see how the practice, social and political practices legitimizing the memory and the contemporary war issue. This theoretical frame, and this is map also about Nagorno-Karabakh before the war. Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous region, you see the map, the contour of the border, and the other is controlled by Nagorno-Karabakh army after the Armenian victory in 1994. It was like security or buffer zone. Proclaimed from the Armenian side as a part of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic also. And 22, we have second Karabakh war. I think it's we have the other war when we have the 1990s. And the result of this war is the situation that from the post-Soviet space, the conflict transferred the Middle Eastern or the great geopolitical context, because before the second Karabakh war, in the academic literature, journalists, etc., described the conflict in the term as a post-Soviet ethnic conflict or ethnic war. But the situation changes because we have the main geopolitical games. The geopolitical new context is related to Syrian conflict and also related to Turkish direct involvement of this war and the Russian direct involvement, the war situation and the after war processes. And new geopolitical situation was that the result of this transfer post-Soviet conflict into new geopolitical context. I see is the prologue. It was the prologue, the Ukrainian war, because now the Ukrainian war is not just a war between Russia and Ukraine. It's new war about new geopolitical context, and the specificity of the Second Karabakh war, also the Turkish direct involvement. It gives the new dimension of the conflict, such as transnationalization of the war. On the other hand, the main actor of transnationalization were Syrian jihadist group who involving in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, supported by Turkish intelligence and the paramilitary terroristic groups like Grey Wolves. And the Syrian groups highly presented during the war. There are different groups, such as some fiction of Jabhat al-Nusra and ideologically motivated Turkmen origin groups who had pan-Turkist ideology or motivation via Turkish nationalism. And in this point, we say that we have the Syrian war also reproduced during the Nagorno-Karabakh war also. The other side of transnationalization, the new step of transnationalization, was Armenian diasporic community. You know that Armenia has transnation like diaspora, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenia, and we have transnational links between different community, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, etc. It was discussed in academic literature. But transnationalization and war, and before the war, we discuss it as like inside of Armenian world. But now we have the transnationalization of the Armenian
3 minutes
conflict.
left for the presentation.
Sorry?
3 minutes left.
Okay, and we have new kind of transnationalization because Armenian community during the war become targets by Turkish nationalistic groups. Like Armenian community also become the part of war as a victims. Also, not only Armenian community, but also genocide memorials outside the world. I would like to mention the first target, the first victim of Armenian community during the war. It was Turkish Armenian community in Istanbul, or historically Constantinople, and Armenians say the Constantinopolitan Armenian community. Just day after the war, the anti-Armenian rally and slogans took place in the very three specific space in Istanbul. It was Hrant Dik Memorials, Armenian Patriarchate, and the Bayazet Square in Istanbul. Why they are symbolic? Hrant Dik, do you know, it killed by Turkish nationalistic man as Armenians, and Armenian Patriarchate was like institutional represented Armenians, and the Bayazet Square is historically related to memory of Armenian genocide, because during the genocide in Bayazet Square was the space and the public execution of Armenian prominent figure took place, and we have we see that shift from the genocide past to contemporary issue when the space become also the space of anti-Armenian attitude, hate speech, discrimination, etc., etc. And the other hand, we have attacked Armenian genocide memorials in France. It was organized by Grey Wolves, Turkish ultranationalistic.
It's 1 minute left, so please proceed to conclusions. 1 minute.
Okay, okay. I have 10 minutes. Okay.
It's 15 minutes and it's last minute for your presentation. So please.
Okay, okay, and France in Genocide Memorial, and also I think that it's the other kind of memory. It's how it was memory using as a justification of the violence. We see the portrait of Enver Pasha and Nuri Pasha was the name of their war crime during the Armenian genocide, and also Nuri Pasha also was Nazi collaborationist during the Second World War. That Enver and Erdogan in his speech in Baku say we will continue the work of Enver Pasha and Nuri Pasha. In these years also, if he sent a message to Ilham Aliyev, a letter and congratulation about liberation of Baku 1988, and he said using the portrait of Nuri Pasha. And also glorification of Caucasus Islamic Army, who was like a main tools genocidal policy during the First World War in the Transcaucasia. And post-war memories was also interesting because the continued glorification of violence. The main space of this policy was the War Trophy Park in Baku as a symbol of post-conflict development and cooperation, because the open of this park of museum officially started when the conference organized by Ilham Aliyev called Post-Conflict Development and Cooperation in the Region. And the foreign visitors of conference participate the opening of the museum. Museum was criticized many international organizations, human rights activists, and now museum is functioning, but Armenian soldier Vask Manekyan and using Hamlet for Armenian soldiers during the battlefront was removed because Armenia opened cause in the International Court of Justice, UN, and after that Azerbaijan removed mannequins of Armenian soldiers and Hamlets too, but this museum was criticized a lot of international organizations and human rights activists also. Thank you. If you will question, we can talk.
Okay, Asen, thank you very much for a timely presentation, and thank you so much for all the arguments you raised. I think especially for bringing up the topic of this, how memory and legitimizations and conflicts, how they are intertwined so very much. So thank you, and I'm sure this will raise so there will be questions and inquiries. Our next speaker is Mudassir Farokhi, who is a tenured academic of war and security studies, and he's currently working as an assistant professor of IR and war studies and team member of Distant Memory Project at former Christian College in Lahore, Pakistan. Mudassir was awarded PhD in war studies in 2020 from the University of Leicester in England. His research and teaching focus is interdisciplinary, and expertise revolve around unconventional warfare, jihadism, and war on terrorism and politics of memory, borders, and wars in modern world. Mudassir has published in renowned journals and presented presented during conferences and panels on war and security studies, and at present he's working on the reasons of failure of the US-led Western military alliance, hybrid and forever wars and Western military thinking and strategy. So Mudassir, the floor is yours.
I think you're muted, Mudassir, so we can't hear you.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Okay,
Hi.
now we hear you and see you.
My Zoom is not allowing me to share the screen. Can you please share from your Zoom?
So you need to share your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, I think it should be available for you to share the screen with Alt S or with the button of this green button.
No, it only works if you have been made co-host, and I was somehow not able to make Mudassir a co-host, so please somebody else could try.
Okay.
Thomas, I also emailed you if you can.
You can also enable screen sharing.
Christina, should I email you? Will you be able to do that?
Not everybody can do that who has been made co-host, so maybe Thomas.
I can show the slides. I will show them. Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you so much,
Because,
Sarah.
yes, thank you so much, Sarah.
My doctoral research and also my current focus is on jihadi wars, and particularly the wars which are inspired ideologically and also motivated because of socio-economic circumstances, but they are always getting inspiration from the religion. When I was doing my PhD research at that time, I was thinking that it's more like a war phenomenon. But as I found the theoretical framework of politics of memory, now story makes more sense. Like all the religiously motivated sort of violence is lying in the memory. For example, in this talk, I investigated two borders. One is on Kashmir and one is on Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, we can see a continued jihadi wars of last 200 years, which were basically rooted in Anglo-Afghan conflicts of British colonial time. But still that phenomena is gaining currency in Afghanistan, and whole war on terrorism framework was executed to address these wars. And the second case study, which is related to Kashmir, and in last 70 years, Kashmir is also going through form of jihadi violence. So I will be talking more on this, that how these wars are related with the memory, and also how politics of memory is providing them more chances of executing memory, and how they are able to get recruits within this phenomena. Sarah, can you please play the slides? So my central argument is that in our contemporary world, like after World War II and Cold War global world, most of the conflicts are lying in the memory. And because of their reliance in the memory of the population, those conflicts are taking new shapes in 21st century. Even the case of Afghanistan and the case of Kashmir, both are grounded in this theoretical framework of politics of memory. So I examined Durand Line, which is the Pak-Afghan border, and also line of control, which is Pakistan, and disputed border of Kashmir. Please, next slide. So what is politics of memory? It is the development and organization of collective memory of a nation, state, or civilization by the political actors. Politics of memory is largely the political mean by which social, political, and cultural events are remembered and recorded, discarded, and reconstructed. Eventually, politics of memory may determine the way history is written and passed from one generation to another. Now, if we focus on the second point, that politics of memory is largely the political mean. Now, Anglo-Afghan war took place almost 200 years ago, but that phenomena is residing in the memory of Afghan society. Now, when there was Afghan jihad against Red Army of Russia, they were able to create those memories, and then they were able to motivate the people to join the ranks of doing jihad against Red Army first. And after 9/11, when Americans started war on terrorism, that same framework of memory was again used to initiate a counter-jihadi insurgency against Americans. Please, next slide. So I applied basically fieldwork technique to talk with the people, and particularly with those people who are involved in this whole process, that how they are able to execute this phenomena. But important point for global politics and international relations is that because of this politics of memory and resulting jihadi wars, as of today, this part of the world is on a nuclear threshold. Like there are 3 nuclear states who are relying on politics of memory and who are also relying on jihadi wars to execute different kind of violent conflict. And what is the rationale of politics of memory in this whole frame of jihadi phenomena? It's us versus them. For example, when British came into Afghanistan, it was us versus them. When Red Army came, it was us versus them. When Americans came, it was us versus them. Now we go to Kashmir, again it's us versus them. That there is Kashmir, and then there is them, India. So the whole process of jihadi insurgency then is based on this premise of us versus them. Sarah, can please next slide. So these are 4 frames which are applicable in this jihadi phenomena. One is the and social norm, then is the popular culture, then is the identity, and also the political culture. Now, in the both borders of Kashmir and also on Afghanistan, there is a separate jihadi identity. Then associated with that jihadi identity, there is a culture, both popular culture of the society and also the political culture, which then fosters these kind of conflicts. Sir, also next slide from this. Next. So these are the findings from Kashmir border, that politics of memory has made Kashmir a nuclear flashpoint. And Kashmir is landlocked among 3 nuclear states, China, Pakistan, and India. And in 2019, because of a jihadi incidents, which was motivated by jihadi insurgents of Kashmir, they executed a suicide blast on Indian forces. And after that suicide blast, there was a conflict between India and Pakistan. And that conflict was ultimately leading towards the usage of tactical nuclear weapon, that both the countries were ready to use nuclear weapons. And the phenomena was executed because of jihadi incident, that a jihadi group in Kashmir, they executed a suicide attack to make their point, but that issue ultimately led towards a violent conflict between India and Pakistan, and there was an air fight between the two. And then because of international mediation, the chances of nuclear clash was avoided, but still diplomatic and other relations are terminated between the two states. Sarah, next slide, please. So these are major jihadi wars which have taken place in LOC or in Kashmir part. In 1947, there was first call of jihad, which was made by tribal leaders of Pakistan and also of Kashmir, and they executed first jihadi war against Indian army. And since 1947, there is particularly in south part of the Kashmir, there is a huge recruitment and also huge execution of jihadi phenomena. And because of this jihadi phenomena which is happening in Kashmir, both India and Pakistan have fought wars in 1947, in 1965, then in 1989, 1988, 1999. Then there are very popular Mumbai attacks of 2008. Then there is 2019 air war between India and Pakistan Air Force. And both countries tend to use signaling theory to execute usage of tactical nuclear weapons. And my point is that because of this phenomena, which is a socio-political movement of waging jihadi violence by so-called holy warriors known as jihadi, it is residing on politics of memory. If we remove the framework of memory, maybe that phenomena can be stopped, but because memory makes sense, and then because of the memory, there is a possibility of getting recruits, so process is continued. Next slide, please. So this is one very glorified jihadi warrior of Kashmir. Kashmiris celebrate his martyr day, and because of his name, then there is another execution of jihadi phenomenon. His name is Burhan Wani, by the way. Sarah, next slide, please. So, though this conflict is resided in the colonial time frame of Durand Line, and that is the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Next, please. In 2021, 15 August 2021, Americans left Afghanistan, and Kabul fell again to Taliban. While from 9/11 and this whole discourse of war on terrorism, we were continuously informed that there is a huge war framework is going on in Afghanistan, and the purpose is to control terrorism and also to control the Taliban movement. But ultimately, Taliban movement was able to get hold of Kabul again. So the whole process, which started in 2001, it was consolidated by jihadis in 2021 after the fall of Kabul, and now they are able to consolidate the power in Kabul. But because of their consolidation of power, again, Afghanistan and border areas of Pakistan are going through jihadi wars. Pakistan Army is executing a counterinsurgency operation against jihadis in borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan. And also 2 days back, in fact, 3 days back, Pakistan ambassador was also attacked in Afghanistan. And that act was executed by ISIS. Sarah, next slide, please. Next, please. So these are the findings on jihadi wars in Afghanistan, that the memory of Anglo-Afghan war is translated into Afghan jihad. Afghan jihad memory is translated into Al-Qaeda and 9/11 and war on terrorism. Then these memories are again translated into Taliban movement. And from jihadi success of Taliban and also within Afghanistan, this phenomena has spilled over into Middle East. The whole process of Arab Spring and particularly Syrian uprising was based on the jihadi logic of different jihadi groups in the Middle East. So 3 Anglo-Afghan wars, first, second, and third, ultimately, finally, the third ended in 1999. Then we have Afghan jihad of 1979 against Red Army. And after that, there was a civil war between different jihadi groups. Then there is 9/11 and American Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan for war on terrorism. Then there is fall of Kabul in 2021. And Syrian uprising and lessons of jihadi violence are also translated into in Middle East, and we can witness jihadi wars in Middle East.
It's 3 minutes left for your presentation.
Sarah, you can play second last and the last slide. So these are a few takeaways that political memory is used to create narrative and counter narratives to attain and sustain power. Memory regimes and political actors tend to impact history to achieve political ends. Conflicts in Kashmir, ex-FATA and Afghanistan are grounded on politics of memory. Sarah, next slide, please. So these are the findings of my work on Afghanistan and also on Kashmir. And conclusion is that it is because of politics of memory and the frameworks of memory that this whole process of jihadi wars is going on in Afghanistan, and also jihadi insurgency in Kashmir is going on since 1947. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentations, and with those lots and lots of knowledge you provided us and concepts, especially also with those how it is related memories and interests of various groups and big powers. So thank you very much for this. So our next speaker today is Ilya Kononov, who is a doctor of sociology and a visiting professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada, and professor and professor of the Department of Philosophy and Sociology at Taras Shevchenko Luhansk National University in Poltava in Ukraine. And this presentation will be translated, and Christina Horvat will be translating this presentation for you. So, Ilya.
Thank you very much.
It's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be Svetlana Zatsekina who's going to be a translator.
Of course.
Yes. So please go ahead.
Before Professor Ilya starts, I can't share the screen with the presentation. So should I email to Sarah or Christina or whoever, just to be able, because the Zoom doesn't allow me to do that.
Okay, or perhaps we can make Svetlana the co-host, so she can share her screen. Is this possible?
It's done. I just made her co-host.
And Svetlana, apologies for mistaking the names, of course. You will be translating the speech of Ilya Kononov. So,
No problem, no problem.
So can you
Just-
share the screen now?
Yes, I will. Yes, yes, of course. Just 1 second. Just give me maybe 1 minute, okay? Uh-oh. Is it Control S, right? Doesn't work with me. Okay.
It's Alt S.
Alt
Okay,
S,
it works now. Okay,
but it's
we
not
see your
the-
screen.
I can see my screen, but that's not the what I wanted to show you actually. Oh, sorry for taking it too long. Okay, so this is the one. Can you see my screen now?
No, not yet.
Okay, 1 second. I don't know why it doesn't. Okay, maybe this. Okay.
Yes, now we see.
Yes, now we can
Thank
see.
Дякую.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Шановні колеги, я буду говорити про політику колективної пам'яті під час війни України і Росії. А Росія в ній виступає агресором, Україна захищає свою незалежність і світовий порядок, який спирається на право. Унікальність ситуації в тому, що народи воюючих держав мають спільну пам'ять. І ми розглянемо, як цю обставину враховують держави в своїй історичній політиці.
So, dear colleagues, today we are going to talk about the politics of collective memory during the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Russia is aggressor here, and Ukraine defends its independence and the world order, which is based on international law. The uniqueness of the situation is that peoples of the warring states have shared their memories. And we are going to look at how do these states take the circumstances into consideration, into account in their historical politics. And I will start with the city of Izum.
Так, я почну з цього місця, з цієї світлини.
Yes, so we are going to start from the city of the Izum, which is in Kharkiv region, and you can see the picture on the slide.
Це місто не так давно звільнено від російської окупації. Воно виглядає от таким от чином, як ви бачили на світлині. І в цьому місці зараз місцева влада прийняла рішення про зміну назв 22 вулиць. Яким чином здійснюються ці зміни? Ну, от скажімо, вулиця Пушкіна стала вулицею Бандери, вулиця Суворова отримала ім'я Петлюри, вулиця Московська стала вулицею Івана Мазепи, ну і так далі, включаючи вулицю Камчатську, яка перейменована на вулицю Аляски.
Right, so in the recently freed Izum from Russian occupation, which suffered significant destruction, people there suffers from the lack of the most necessary things, right? The local authorities decided to deal with the toponymic issues first. It was made a decision to rename 22 streets and different squares in the city. For example, Pushkin Street became Bandera Street, Suvorov Street was named after Petlyura, Moskovska Street became Ivan Mazepa Street, and lots of others you can see. And namely, Kamchatka Street was renamed to Alaska Street.
От Ізюм можна розглядати як дзеркало того, що відбувається у всій Україні зараз.
So Izum it can be described as, you know, like as a mirror of what's going on in the whole Ukraine nowadays.
Вони віддзеркалюють зміни семіотики громадського простору у всій Україні. І я б так сказав, що ці зміни відбуваються під сигнатурою Степан Бандера.
So these toponymic changes in Izum are a reflection of changes in semiotics of the space throughout of Ukraine. These changes we could name are taking place under the signature of Stepan Bandera.
Політичний сув, правий сув політики колективної пам'яті в Україні почався ще за часів президентства Ющенка. Рух у цьому напрямку прискорився за президентства Порошенка і продовжується при Володимирі Зеленському. Політика історичної пам'яті в Україні і відповідна політика в Російській Федерації розвивались, будучи орієнтованими одна на одну, як теза і антитеза, але без будь-якої можливості синтезу. Теза і антитеза постійно посилювалися. Вищі посадові особи Росії реагували на політику колективної пам'яті в Україні як на перекручення історії. Вже перед війною сторони дійшли до такого стану відносин взаємного заперечення, які можна визначити як відносини антиросії і антиукраїни.
So a consistent shift in the politics of collective memory towards the right of the political spectrum became during the presidency of Viktor Yushchenko. The movement in this direction accelerated during the presidency of Petro Poroshenko and continues now during the Volodymyr Zelensky's presidency. The politics of history, memory in Ukraine and the corresponding politics in the Russian Federation developed with an orientation towards each other as thesis and antithesis, excluding any possibility of synthesis. Theses and antitheses were constantly strengthened. Senior officials of Russia reached to the policy of collective memory in Ukraine as the distortion of history. Even before the war, the parties reached such a state of mutual objections, which can be defined as anti-Russia and anti-Ukraine.
І для того, щоб проаналізувати це, я скажу декілька слів про методологічний підхід. Я не буду тут багатослівним, це окреме питання. На жаль, ця царина досліджень методологічно не розроблена, але все ж таки, я ставлю перед собою завдання виявити зміни в політиці колективної пам'яті України і Росії перед війною і в її ході. Методологія, якою я буду користуватись в даному випадку, це буде використання ідей Бурдьє про соціальні поля і їх модуси. Я вважаю, що в сучасній світовій соціології ідеї Бурдьє найбільш повно проаналізовані і, більш того, застосовані достатньо ефективно в польській соціології. Це стосується школи професора Томаша Зарицького, і я буду спиратись на праці безпосередньо професора Зарицького і його колег.
Here I would like to talk about methodological approach, which was used in the research. And the task, well, it is worth to state that it is not enough researched. This topic is not enough research, but so my task will be to, in the review, is to identify the direction of changes in the politics of collective memory of Ukraine and Russian Federation before and after, and during the war. And as for the methodology I'm going to use, it will be used the application of Pierre Bourdieu's ideas about the social field and its modes. And I assume that the most analyzed, those applications were the most analyzed and used in the Polish school of Tomasz Zaricki. So the review will be also based on application of field sociology by Tomasz Zaricki and his colleagues.
Ну, і от якщо підходити до цієї реальності з позиції Бурдьє, то в Російській Федерації поле колективної пам'яті традиційно структурувалось напруженням між полюсами умовних західників і славянофілів. Ця структура історичного поля в Росії відтворювалась завжди, коли вона отримувала можливість розвиватись відносно автономно від зовнішніх чинників. При цьому західники тяжіли до лібералізму, а умовні славянофіли – до консерватизму. Ліві ідеї в цьому полі маргіналізувалися, примикаючи до одного чи другого з полюсів. Але останній термін президентства Путіна був ознаменований репресивним втручанням влади в поле колективної пам'яті і поступовою деградацією ліберального поля західників. Головним гравцем в полі стала сама влада в особі Путіна і наближених до нього інтелектуалів, ну, як приклад Дугін. Гранична гетерономія поля – його нинішній стан. Унікальний випадок це в світовій історії, ну, у всякому випадку в сучасному світі, коли в полі колективної пам'яті домінуючою фігурою є президент країни.
In the Russian Federation, the field was traditionally structured by the tension between the poles of conventional Westerners and Slavophiles, so-called Slavophiles. This structure of the historical field in Russia was reproduced whenever it was given the opportunity to develop relatively autonomously from external factors. At the same time, Westerners gravitated to liberalism and relative Slavophiles to conservatism. Left ideas in this field were marginalized, adhering to either one or another of the poles. The last term of Vladimir Putin's presidency was marked by repressive government intervention into the field of collective memory and a gradual degradation of liberal pole of the Westerners. The main player in this field became the authority itself in the person of Vladimir Putin and intellectuals close to him, for example, Dugin. The boundary heteronomy of the field is its current state. And we must say that it is a unique case in the modern world when the dominant figure in the field of a collective memory is the president of the country.
Ну, в зв'язку з цим варто зупинитись на уявленнях самого Путіна. Перш за все, на його соціальній антології. От його соціальна антологія виглядає, ну, з моєї точки зору, наступним чином. Перше, є справжні держави, які мають примордіальну природу. Тобто вони виникають, існують природним чином. Друге, є штучні держави, які створюються як знаряддя в боротьбі справжніх держав. Третє, Росія справжня держава, Україна штучна. Проект незалежної України в його історичному розвитку Путін розглядає як змову на шкоду Росії. Четверте, перенесення на відносин держав етичних координат. Росія завжди в цьому випадку виглядає втіленням добра, а її супротивники зла. Етика у Путіна стає сходинкою до політичної теології. Агресія проти України обґрунтовується як війна останніх днів, як війна з сатанізмом. І я скажу, що це дуже небезпечно для усього світу.
So we should stop here on the social ontology of Vladimir Putin, and there are a couple of points here. So the first is that there are real states, to his point, that have a primordial nature, so they arise, right? The second one, there are artificial states that are created as tools in the struggle between the real states. The third, Russia is a real state and Ukraine is an artificial one. The project of independent Ukraine in its historical development, Vladimir Putin considers as their conspiracy against Russia. Number four, a transfer of ethical coordinates to state relations. Russia always looks like the embodiment of good and its opponents as evil. Ethics in this sense becomes the stepping stone to political theology. And the fifth, aggression against Ukraine is justified as war of the last days, as the war against Satanism. And I must say that this is very dangerous for the whole world.
Це стабільні риси світогляду Путіна. Але в нього є і такі примінні риси. Наприклад, в ході війни риторика Путіна почала змінюватись. Він почав поєднувати риторику російського націоналізму і посилання на Івана Ільїна з антиколоніальними заявами. До того ж, ідея світсистемного аналізу з'явилась в його виступах і постколоніалізму. Вони, правда, ці ідеї опиняються в такому правоконсервативному розчині, який несумісний з цими ідеями. Це можна вважати свідченням маніпулятивності виступів Путіна.
So those points that were on the previous slides are Vladimir Putin's permanent points and points of view, and then during the war, Putin's rhetoric also changed, and he started to combine the rhetoric of Russian nationalism and reference to Ilyin with his anti-colonial statements. The ideas of the world system analysis and post-colonialism find themselves in the right-wing conservative solution. And we can see that they can't exist together, right? So such combination is an evidence of manipulativeness.
Тепер перейдемо до України. В Україні поле виробництва актуальної колективної пам'яті є теж гетерономним, але в ньому немає якогось одного домінуючого суб'єкта. В ньому є домінуючі ідеї, які стверджуються колективною державною бюрократією. Це перше. Друге. До 2014 року напруження в цьому полі створювалося різною геополітичною орієнтацією акторів. Умовно, проросійською, прозахідною. До певної міри це відповідало полярності славянофілів Західній в Росії, але з врахуванням української специфіки. Для України це був вибір між СНД чи Європейським Союзом. І третє. При включенні в це поле лівих ідей, вони точно так же, як і в російському полі, деградували, адже комуністам чи соціалістам доводилось ставати на сторону тих чи інших капіталістичних груп.
Now we will go on to Ukraine. So in Ukraine, the field of production of current collective memory is also heterogeneous, but there are no single dominant subjects in it. It contains dominant ideas that are asserted by the collective state bureaucracy. Until 2014, tensions in this field were created by different geopolitical orientation of the actors, namely pro-Russian and pro-Western ones. To a certain extent, this corresponded to the polarity of the so-called Slavophiles and Westerners in Russia, however, having Ukrainian specifics. For Ukraine, it was a choice between the post-Soviet states or the European Union. When left, the same as in Russia, when left-wing ideas were included in the field, they degraded after all communists and socialists had to side with one or another capitalist group.
У 2014 році становище різко змінилося. Полюсами поля стали помірковані націоналістичні погляди і крайні націоналістичні погляди при домінуванні останніх. Правда, мета вступу в ЄС та НАТО була спільною для акторів в цьому полі, тобто виступала доксою в термінології Бурдьо. Друге, іншим модусом, причому домінуючим за часів Порошенка, стала декомунізація. Як політична практика, вона почалась ще під час громадянського протистояння осені-зими 13-14 років та подальшої війни на Донбасі. Статус державної політики їй надали 4 закони 2015 року. Пік декомунізації припав на листопад 15-го, весну 16 року, коли були змінені топоніми 51 493 об'єктів. Знесено 2389 пам'ятників і пам'ятних знаків. Політика історичної пам'яті за часів Порошенка була не лише внутрішньо репресивною, але й провокувала конфлікти з сусідами, ведучи до руйнування вже досягнутих домовленостей.
In 2014, the situation changed radically. The poles of the fields have become moderate nationalist views and extreme national views, with the dominant with the last ones. The goal of the joining the European Union and NATO was common to all actors in this field. Another mode of the dominant one became decommunization during Petro Poroshenko's presidency. As a political practice, it appeared during the civil confrontation in the autumn and winter in 2013-2014, and the subsequent war in Donbass. The status of the state policy of decommunization was provided by 4 laws adopted by Verkhovna Rada on April the 9th, 2015. The peak of decommunization fell on November 2015 and spring 2016, when the toponyms of 51,493 objects were changed and 2,389 monuments were demolished. The policy of historical memory during Petro Poroshenko's time was not only internally repressive, but also provoked conflicts with the neighbors, leading to destruction of already reached agreements.
So it's 6 minutes left for your presentation, meaning 3 for the presentation itself and other 3 for the translation.
Ми все ж таки завершимо, у нас дуже небагато залишилось.
3 минути, 3 хвилини залишилося.
Добре. Перемога Зеленського на президентських виборах мала своїм наслідком часткове відновлення структури поля колективної пам'яті, яким воно було до 2014 року. Історична пам'ять знову стала предметом публічних дебатів, але у внутрішньому житті країни спостерігався дрейф більш в бік культурної політики, в тому числі пов'язаної з колективною пам'яттю, яка здійснювала за часів Порошенка. Особливо суттєву роль тут відігравав і відіграє секретар Ради національної безпеки і оборони Олексій Данілов. Під час війни виступи Данілова є найбільш радикальними в українському керівництві і часто деструктивними для України. Під час війни риторика Зеленського стала дуже схожою на риторику Порошенка.
The victory of Volodymyr Zelensky in the 2019 on the presidential elections resulted in partial restoration of the structure of the field of collective memory as it was before 2014. Historical memory has become a subject of public debates again. But in the internal life of the country, there was a drift of the side of cultural politics, including those related to collective memory, which was carried out during the Petro Poroshenko's presidency. The role of the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Alexei Danilov, is especially important here. During the war, Alexei Danilov's speeches were the most radical in the Ukrainian leadership and often destructive for Ukraine. During the war, Volodymyr Zelensky's rhetoric became very similar to Petro Poroshenko's rhetoric.
In conclusion, політика пам'яті в Україні і Російській Федерації розвивалася в результаті взаємної негативної орієнтації. Це обумовило їх спільні риси. Спільними рисами російської і української офіційних історичних наративів є їх консерватизм, пов'язаний з правою частиною політичного спектру, націоналізм, орієнтація на семантичне насильство стосовно опонентів. При цьому самі історичні наративи зорієнтовані один проти одного як антиукраїна і антиросія. Ці наративи спрямовують осмислення війни як священної, в якій між сторонами немає будь-яких спільних цінностей. Це веде до того, що противники сприймаються як нелюди, зникає платформа для післявоєнного мирного співіснування. В умовах війни взаємна негативна орієнтація використовується для примусової внутрішньої згуртованості, чому сторони парадоксальним чином сприяють одна одній.
And the conclusion, the memory of politics in Ukraine and the Russian Federation developed as a result of mutual negative orientation, and this determined their common features. Common features of the Russian and Ukrainian official historical narratives are their conservatism, connection with the right part of the political spectrum, nationalism, targeting semantic violence against opponents. At the same time, historical narratives are oriented against each other as anti-Ukrainian and anti-Russia. These narratives direct the understanding of war as sacred, in which there are no common values between the parties. This leads to the fact that opponents are perceived as non-human. The platform for post-war peaceful coexistence is disappearing. In the conditions of war, mutual negative orientation is used for forced internal cohesion, in which the parties paradoxically contribute to each other.
І поради українському керівництву. Не будувати політику колективної пам'яті за принципом аби не так, як у москалів, а базуватися на раціональних засновках. Відкидання цієї спільної історичної культурної спадщини є саморуйнівним для України. Україна повинна виступити захисницею всього прогресивного, що будувало спільні історії і в спільних культурних надбаннях. Треба захищати гуманізм від варварства, а не керуватись виключно етнічними критеріями приналежності постатей, творів, ідей. Це стосується російської мови, яка є мовою значної частини народу України. До того ж, криміналізація російської мови шкідлива для Збройних сил України, де на фронті склалася функціональна двомовність, яка є запорукою та віри у військових колективах. Це також мова спілкування з місцевим населенням на Донбасі.
And the last advice to the Ukrainian leadership will be not to build a collective politics memory according to the principle not like in Moscowitz, but based on rational principles. Rejection of the entire common historical and cultural heritage is self-destructive for Ukraine. Ukraine should act as the defender of everything progressive that was in the common history and in the common cultural heritage. Humanism must be protected from barbarianism, not to be guided exclusively by ethnic belonging criteria for figures, works, and ideas. This also applies to the Russian language, which is the language of the large part of the people of Ukraine. In addition, criminalization of Russian language is harmful to the armed forces of Ukraine, where at the front line, functional bilingualism has been developed, which is a guarantee of trust in the military groups. It is also the language of communication with the people of Donbas.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Many thanks, Svetlana, for your fantastic work.
Thanks. Thank you.
Дуже дякую. Thank you very much for the presentation and translation as well. And thank you for making this important point, bringing us to the very current conflict. We are discussing current conflicts, but even the ongoing one, how memories are weaponized and employed by aggressors and occupants, and for the recommendation of how to put this into practice. I'm sure this is a very important point as well. So thank you once again to both Ilya Kononov and Svetlana Zasekina for your presentation. And now let me introduce our last speaker for today, Ivan Gololobov, who joined the department in 2016 as a teaching fellow in politics and Russian studies. And prior to this, he was doing research at the University of Warwick. And he was awarded his PhD from the Ideology and Discourse Analysis Program, Department of Government at University of Sussex. So Ivan, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, University of Essex, thank you very much. Okay, so I will try to share my screen and you tell me if it works.
Yes.
Does it?
Yes, we
Yes.
see we see two
Okay.
screens. Yeah, presentation.
Perfect. Okay. Right. So thank you very much for you guys for being here, and thank you very much for Ilya for your presentation. I think my presentation will talk a lot to yours, to some things which you've been talking about. So brief context of where this research which I want to share with you comes from. Obviously, since the beginning of full-on invasion of Russia on Ukraine, a lot of Russians who are against the war had to figure out how to deal with the situation, right? And if citizen, in terms of kind of being a citizen, it was more or less clear to stand in solidarity with Ukraine on the one hand and to support anti-war movement in Russia on the other hand. These were two straightforward strategies. As an academic, it was not that clear, okay, what can we do as Russian studies to help Ukraine, to help the situation and to make the world a better place, right? So this is an attempt to figure out, probably for myself first, okay, what can I do as an academic to deal with the situation, right? And one, the direction to which I think we as academics can go in looking at the situation is, or me as an academic with a particular background and particular expertise, is to look at the situation of the split in the Russian society, right? After the beginning of the full-on invasion, obviously, Russia became massively split. A broken connection is a quotation from the documentary of Andrei Lashak, where he interviewed relatives who are against the war, pro-war, and the situation where they found themselves is that they literally could not talk to each other. They spoke the same language, but it was the communication of dumb with the blind, as we say in Russian, right? Разговор слепого с глухим. So the argument of this paper is that coming from the position of being anti-war, anti-invasion, or calling the war and supporting Ukrainian independence, is that to call those and to look at those Z-patriots, as we call them in Russia, as simply mad would not be constructive. It might be easy, but it wouldn't help the situation. So this paper, this presentation, this research is an attempt to look into those mentalities, into this discourse which supports special military operation, as it's suggested to call officially in Russia, right? And the point of this presentation is that the supporters of the special military operation are not mad, they're not illogical from our point of view. They do have logic, but their logic is different, right? And if we want to shift their discourse, we have to understand how it works. We have to find the ways to break into the picture of the world, into the world view, right? So, and this paper tries to unpack this illogical logic of those supporters of the special military operation. So, and this logic to me becomes evident if we look in the way they imagine perfect Russia. They imagine Russia as a project, right? Traditionally, utopia is in some parts of political science, for instance, it is seen as something essentially bad, essentially useless. But in the other part of the political theory where I come from, no, utopia is seen as something without which politics could not function. If we eliminate utopian dimension from our political horizon, we're going to talk about economy, we're going to talk about management, but not politics, and then we're going to end up in the banality of evil and Hannah Arendt, and we know where it led us to, right? So utopia is something good, but traditionally utopia is seen as somehow progressive project, right? Utopian society, the perfect society is a society of the future, right? Okay, this is a quote from the International and its Russian version. Okay, we're going to destroy the old world and we're going to build something new is going to be coming, right? But my question is, are all utopias are constructed in this way where the perfect society is placed in the future? My answer is no. And looking at the post-Soviet history of Russia, we see clearly that for at least 3 decades, there was another type of utopia developed, right? it can be called the Russia we lost, right? Started with the famous documentary of Govorukhin, released in 1992, and then repeated this module, this mode, was repeated in many political manifestos, right? The self-proclaimed leader of the enlightened conservatism, Nikita Mikhalkov, right, talking about the perfect past. The Prilepin, neo-Stalinist or Stalinism, representative of this Stalinism 2.0, again talks about perfect Russia as located in the past, but not in pre-revolutionary, but in the Soviet Union of Stalin's time. Even Putin himself, more and more recently, keeps on talking about past as the point of reference for the perfect Russia he wants to build. His famous quote about Pechenegi and Polovts, right? Semi-mythical tribes of the 13th, 14th century, right? So the degree to which Russian political elite and the dominant political discourse in Russia became obsessed with the past can be even exemplified with this street art illegal installation of Timofey Radia, To Live by the Past, which was installed in Yekaterinburg in June 2022, right? It was the Soviet old school buildings where previously on top of these buildings, there were a slogan, Vперед коммунизму, forward towards communism. But now, as a reflection of what's going on in Russia at the moment, Radia reversed the slogan, right? To live by the past. The slogan didn't last long. I think it was only there for 2 days and then it was removed by the police. Right, so what does it say to us? So this particular type of conservative utopia can be rephrased as the mode of subjunctive Russia, where, as Mikhail Yelizarov in his novel Librarian posited it, that it is the way of thinking about Russia in the way of subjunctive mood, right? When I grew up a bit, I loved the Soviet Union, but not for what it was, but what it could have become if things had turned out differently, right? So it is some sort of reference to the past. It is use of memory, but it is a use of memory and it is use of the past projected to the future, avoiding the presence, right? The present becomes here very important because it becomes suppressed. The present is here something which distorted, which distracted this perfect past. And looking to the future, we have somehow to eliminate this present distraction to reconstruct this supposedly perfect past, right? Okay, in further couple of slides, I have insanely huge amount of text, so I'm probably going to skip it and briefly introduce how I think we can approach this project of eliminating the present, right? The Moscow Tartu Semiotic School, probably the only school of political science or political thought within the Soviet Union back in the 70s and 80s, obviously concealed under the tradition of literary studies, suggested, right, that the use of the past and these two modes of utopia can be associated with two types of, they call it consciousness, we can call it discourses. They're absolutely translatable here, and I can later on, if you're interested, I can prove that, right? So historical, the progressive utopias are based on historical type of discourse, right? Where we see the cause and causality, right? Event which happened in the past defines the event which happened in the future. Great. The opposite to that is cosmological consciousness, right? So anything which is going to happen in the future is not defined by the events which happened in the past, but it's a return to some sort of primordial past, ideal primordial past, cyclic time, all those kind of things. So again, this cosmological discourse, cosmological consciousness is based on suppression of the present. Present is not important. What does it lead us to? Yuri Lotman, one of the key scholars of the Moscow Tartu Semiotic School, right, extends this distinction between cosmological and historical into the distinction between religious and scientific consciousness, but we can call them discourses again, right? And here, what is interesting, again, Lotman, writing about these things in the beginning of the 80s, says that religious consciousness is essentially based on disempowering of action, on disempowering of decision, on disempowering of what he calls people, right? And here he uses a quote from Russian medieval chronicles, which describes the people as stradniki, sufferers, basically people who are located outside of any process of producing meanings, outside of any process of giving sense to what is going on around, right? If you read this quote, you can probably start realizing how much of what's going on in Russia nowadays Lotman pinpointed in this reference, right? Okay, if you know what Greg Yudin, for instance, is talking about, if a lot of Russian sociologists about why protest is so slow in Russia, why protest is so difficult in Russia, not just because of coercive apparatus, not because of insane amount of and brutality of the police, but also because within Russian mentality, I hate this word, but I can't find any other better one at the moment. It is very difficult even to figure out the language in which you can act against those situations, the language in which you can act against the authorities, right? So outside of semiosis, suppression of subjectivity, together with the suppression of the present, it leads to the suppression of causality. It eliminates the subject of formal logic, right? It eliminates someone who can construct this logical chain, and it eliminates the moment from which this logical chain can be constructed, right? And I think here is where we can start understanding what is going on in the heads of those in support of special military operation, right? Here are a few quotes. By the way, I have the detailed version of this presentation, not just in PowerPoint, but like an article format text with a lot of examples with proper references. If you're interested, I can, which is both in English and in Russian. If you're interested, I can share it with you. So few quotes here, right? As Russian journalist Alexander Nevzorov says, the main role of the church, talking about the kind of prominence of religious discourse in contemporary Russian politics, is not to teach how to believe in God, but to teach faith as such, to take with no proofs everything which is said, and everything which is said, if I'm by the people who are hierarchically placed much higher. This is faith. This is complete deactivation of critical thinking. What is important here is that within this mode of religious discourse, what is important is not what is said, but by whom it is said. In Habermasian terms, this is the claim of validity, where something comes from, where the speech comes from, not what is within the speech. What is within the speech is scientific discourse. Religious discourse is where who speaks, right? That makes it valid. So, and further quote several also suggest that in the last 2 decades, Russian authorities increasingly think in a religious mode. Svetlana Alexievich, Nobel laureate in literature 2015, clearly suggests that Putin himself talks more and more like a messiah. Russian actor Artur Smolyaninov, the star of one of the favorites, Putin's film Nine's Company, also suggests that Russian government increasingly lacks causality, which is another effect of religion's consciousness or religious discourse. So the main problem with those who are disempowered, to make decisions from the Russian side is that their causal relationships are completely broken. They don't receive signals that every action is followed by consequences. And this reflection, you can find it a lot within this kind of debate on what is going on with the brains, with the minds of the Russian people nowadays.
3 minutes left for your presentation.
Yeah, I'm nearly there. Gluchovsky is the other example which you can refer, who clearly says that, okay, we have the problem with causal thinking in Russia. So if you want to deal something, if you want to break into this logic, you have to realize that causality is not there. And conclusion is that the conservative utopia appeals to a different type of logic, right? We can try to understand it within scientific language, within the instruments of scientific discourse, but it operates in a different type of logic, in a different type of discourse, right? So it is the common logic, its grammar, its language is different. And to this language of conservative utopia and Putin's utopia, the language of science, the language of logic, the language of causality is alien, it is external. If we want to break into that, we have to understand that. And what it means in reality is that this externalization of causality, externalization of formal logic opens the possibility for conservative utopia to bring together seemingly contradictory type of ideological projects such as neo-Stalinism, neo-traditionalism, and neo-traditionalism of Russian Orthodox Church. This is an icon of Stalin, right? We all know that Stalin was one of the biggest oppressors of Orthodox Church. And for the scientific mentality, for the scientific discourse, this is an absolute oxymoron. I mean, it's like a model schizophrenia. But for the people who operate in this mode, in this discourse of conservative utopia, it all goes well together because it operates in a particular logic of this religious discourse, religious consciousness, which has completely different grammar than the logic we operate. So our final bit, okay, this is the very last couple of sentences. This is kind of my attempt to see how we can break into this discourse, right? How we can understand the logic of something which is completely illogical from many points of view. The question I have is like, okay, what do we do with it, right? So obviously the dominant anti-war discourse in Russia nowadays comes from the liberal perspective, right? It tries to talk to these people in this logic of economic rationalism. But would it be even heard? And if not, which kind of language should we devise to be able to reach these people? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, for bringing us a lot of important tools to think about the discourses happening right now in Russia. So now we open the floor for the discussion.
Yeah, how do I unshare my screen?
Oh, you need to stop sharing, I think, with the very same button.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So you can use the function of raise hand, or you can type your questions in the chat if you prefer it this way.
And we have already some questions from the chat, so maybe it's a good idea to start with them, right? So the first two questions from Olga Dernova, one for Mudassir, I think, and one for Ilya Kononov. So the one for Mudassir is Pakistan's interference in Afghan affairs dangerous? New Delhi fears escalation in Kashmir, and this question is related as well to Wali Aslam's later comment, which says it depends on dangerous for whom. Like the Pakistani interference in Afghanistan serves the interests of a number of powerful actors inside and outside the country. Mudassir, would you like to comment on this?
First of all, Indian fears are more based on security paranoia. For example, Indian beliefs are that any jihadi consolidation in Afghanistan will ultimately boost jihadi insurgency in Kashmir. So this hypothesis has no empirical support yet. Even since it is this security paranoia is going on, but this is not happening. And as Wali Saab has also addressed this, interference in Afghanistan is not only a domestic or a national security issue. It's also an international security issue in which international players and particularly US interest matters more. And that's why interference in Afghanistan depends on global politics. And what I have observed in recent times, like since 2021, Pakistan is trying to isolate itself from Taliban. And Taliban are also trying to get them isolated from Pakistan. Because of this, Indians and Afghan Taliban are also in contact to develop different sort of Indian-Afghan policy.
Okay, thanks a lot. And the second, thanks a lot, Mudassir. And the second question of Olga goes to Ilya, and it's in Ukrainian. Svetlana, can I ask you for translating this question for us in English?
Yes, of course. So the question was, to your opinion, can the part of historical memory of Ukrainian people which was mutual with Russia, which is till 1990, be lost? And will it cause any negative consequences? Or can Ukraine grow new cultural layer which is different from Russia? And there is the answer from Ilya. Probably I will translate this one in the chat. Pan Ilya can also contribute to that maybe more. So the question about this loss and gainings is very abstractive, and we can lose everything, but do we need to lose anything? Of course, it is advisable to grow, especially the new cultural things, but this question has to be more discussed as a separate, special problem, and should be discussed more.
Thank you. Ilya, would you like to add anything to this?
Ну, я коротко написав. Якщо говорити про Україну, закони про декомунізацію були прийняті під час війни. І в цьому сенсі вони не могли зустріти якогось суттєвого спротиву. Ну і якщо так говорити от за даними соціології, то якби в Галичині вони навряд чи могли чогось додати, тому що зараз семіотична модель, яка склалась в Галичині ще в 90-ті роки, розповсюджується на всю країну. Інші регіони це сприймають, ну, скажімо так, не дуже з радістю таку модель, тому що стирається їх власна пам'ять. В Україні історична пам'ять дуже регіоналізована. І уніфікація історичної пам'яті сприймається, безумовно, з тривогою. І от я на сході України особисто бачив, скажімо, результати декомунізації, коли посеред міст на площах стоять просто постаменти, розбиті постаменти, без пам'ятників, без нічого. Це відбувалося в дуже, такий, як би це сказати, некультурний спосіб. Тому викликало таке от відчуття не просто звільнення від, скажімо, від тоталітарної спадщини, а такого певного розкультурення країни, яке супроводжувало те, що відбувалося. Дуже багато виникало питань з приводу перейменувань. Там у нас в Україні такий скандальний характер мало перейменування там Кіровограду на Кропивницький. Місцеве населення хотіло це інакше, щоб було. Взагалі, якби прецедентним вона стала перейменування міста Комсомольська на місто Горішні Плавні. Така ситуація. І там було ще інше запитання. Це запитання про те, чи може...
Maybe we could give time for Svana to translate, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay, so as for the decommunization, those laws were accepted in the time of the war, so they couldn't really be resisted by the people because there was no chance to do that. And there was taken the model of Halachina region and trying to project it to the whole Ukraine, but the historical memory in Ukraine is very regionalized, right? And it's not like it's not unified. It's not the one for the whole Ukrainian territory. And then some of the regions, like central regions and eastern regions, didn't really perceive this as a positive thing. And then Professor Ilya was talking about how it looked like the process of decommunization looked like in some of the cities that the postaments were just destroyed, and you could see only the, like the base of the postament, but without, like the person standing on it, and it didn't look, it wasn't going on in a cultural way, right? It was more it had the features of more barbarian, but not cultural. So that is not a positive thing. And the biggest discourse, I guess, there were debates faced and encountered the questions according to the renaming of streets and some cities, especially there was a big debate about renaming Kirovograd into Kropyvnytsky, and there was also the example of one city called Komsomolsk, and it was renamed to Horishny Plavny, but the population of those cities were a little bit against, and they didn't really support this idea.
І там друге запитання, мені воно сподобалось, це запитання про те, чи може зникнути певний шар історичної пам'яті, і чи може потім виникнути якби на іншому ґрунті якийсь шар. В принципі, це запитання цікаве, і воно таке, я би сказав, добре орієнтує на подальшу наукову роботу. В принципі, то зникнути може що завгодно, і ми вже з цим стикаємось. Але, ви розумієте, все дуже непросто. Не все піддається маніпуляціям. І є структурні сили, які можуть себе потім проявити зовсім не так, як цього очікували. Ті, хто організовували і здійснювали свідомі впливи. От, скажімо, в Україні після декомунізації при опитуваннях ми спостерігаємо серед молоді зростання зацікавлення Радянським Союзом. Причому Радянський Союз починають сприймати як певну утопію. Частина молоді от таким чином реагує на заборони. І це, в принципі, не є чимось унікальним для тільки України. Це характерно і для інших країн. Тобто ми можемо говорити, що до певної міри ми тут маємо справу з такими типовими процесами. Коли одне покоління від чогось відмовляється, через певний час, як правило, третє покоління повертається до цих ідей. Тому бажано, щоб ці зміни відбувались без насильства, щоб поле історичної пам'яті могло автономно розвиватись, а не тільки під тиском ззовні. Під тиском ззовні воно може тільки деградувати, на жаль. Я поки що так от відповів, хоча я кажу, що це запитання мені самому сподобалось, і мені виявляється, що над цим можна працювати.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, so as for the translation, yes, to the question of this question about the loss and gaining of some cultural layer. So that was a very interesting question, and Professor Ilya really liked the question, and it orients him to the further research, right? But so what he can say that not everything should be manipulated, yes, and because some structural forces can arise. In Ukraine, after decommunization, in the social questionnaires, they could see that young people were interested in the Soviet Union as anti-utopia, and this is how they reacted to this forced decolonization, that something was forbidden. And this is not only seen in Ukraine, this is also seen in different other countries when different generations actually react differently to the previous generation and to what was going on in the country. And then Professor Ilya suggested that those processes should be not violent and should be conducted without violence, because they have to develop without outer forces, but just, naturally. And thanks for the interesting question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We still have some questions in the chat, but now it's time for questions from the audience, right, Małgosia?
Yes, so please, if you'd like to address our speakers directly, then please raise your hand using the button. And perhaps before something crystallized, let me start. I have two questions to our speakers. So my first question is to Arsen. I was really interested in your framework regarding legitimization and theories you employ and how you employ them in your research. So I would be very interested if you could talk more about it. How do you see it and how it works for you? And my second question is to Mudassir. Regarding the martyrdom celebrations or commemorations in Kashmir. So are they something organized like privately, or privately meaning at home, or something? Is it like a wider celebration? Who is there and how do they do it? I would be really curious to learn more about these. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, it was the part of my research and about how, if I listen correctly, how it's working, the process of legitimation, you mean?
How the theory, this anthropology of legitimization, so how these what these concepts are, like more precisely, if you can tell how do you employ them in your research? How do you use them? What are the ideas there?
We compare the social practices, how the legitimation perceived by the people and how the authority using the past to legitimize ongoing political processes in terms of war. Because we compare also the first Nagorno-Karabakh war and the second Karabakh war, and we see that the legitimation of the violence is coming from authority Turkey and Azerbaijan, and also it's not also discursive practice, it's also based on the commemorative practice, because we see that in the military parade, victory parade in Azerbaijan, in the museum, the Victory Museum in Azerbaijan, and repetition, the denialist and violence symbolism also. And it's interesting that how is it perceived by the popular people's side, and I follow it the museum case in Baku, and all the people had the positive attitude approaches about this museum, and also sculptors who imagine Armenian as an ugly and crowdly people. They legitimize it. They say that we try to find real Armenian and we find it real Armenian here. And this multi-dimension process of legitimation took place now. And second question about...
if I may, just a little follow up. So what role do you see of those museums and institutions? What role more broadly they play in this legitimization process?
And also I think we need to discuss in the wider context, because we discuss in antagonistic memory, yes, an agonistic memory, but this kind of concept working in democratic society. And we need to discussing how can't memory we need to remember, etc., etc. But we cannot discuss in the international level, because one side Armenia much more democratic country and Azerbaijan is dictatorship. And it's not accidental that Aliyev opened this museum, and this museum only in the world. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein Museum was in Iraq. And we can compare this kind of memory, and we can discuss how the current memory work in Armenia, but we cannot change this kind of memory in Azerbaijan or in Turkey. Turkey, the other case, but we see the huge problem inside of Azerbaijan because violence and the victory using the legitimation on Aliyev's power. He needs to have victory. Every time he needs to have a victory. And the other types of legitimation violence using by Ilham Aliyev is the discursive practice of Second World War, Great Patriotic War, because in Azerbaijan this war called Great Patriotic War. It's referring to Soviet heritage, and because only Soviet Union using this kind of terminology, and the other side. This year they had commemoration and using like poems about Stalingrad or Red Army, changed the name of Stalingrad, for example, in Shushi, etc., and using the Soviet style commemorative practice to transfer in the Azerbaijani context. That's why we have two kind of cultural background, cultural roots of commemoration. It's based on Soviet heritage and the Turkish denialism.
Okay, thank you so much. This is so very interesting. Yeah, and Mudassir, please.
So if we look at this whole process of jihadism, it's a very organized and branded activity in which there is a requirement of lot of marketing communication. Then these martyrs and their funerals, they become a marketing source. Though since 2019, they are stopped in Kashmir, and Indian government and also Indian Army is not letting martyrs to brand themselves. And also the organizations which used to execute these funerals are also kind of being controlled by Indians. So this phenomena is not happening in last 2 or 3 years, but previously it was privately organized. And rather than traditional ceremonial phenomena, it was also a marketing phenomena in which organization used to convey to their proxy sponsors that see what we can do, and also for recruitment within Kashmir, these funerals became a source of celebration and also for recruitment. But they were always privately organized by the organizations who normally claim that we have done this or we have executed that attack or these are our martyrs. Like most of the funerals in Kashmir, they are being organized by Jamaat-ul Dawa or Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is the like Jihadi chapter of Kashmir.
Okay, thank you very much for addressing these questions. So I have one more or two questions pending, but I wouldn't like to be asking all the time. So is anyone from the audience, is there anyone from the audience willing to ask a question?
If not, we still have one question pending in the chat. Okay, so probably is the time to raise this question from Sarah Wilson, which you can see in the chat. And this is a more general question. I think it might be addressed from each of our speakers. So I will read it out. Are notions of collective memory used in a broader construction of regional relations at all? For example, are Ukrainian overtures to Azerbaijan and not Armenia based on shared history at all, or on a politics related to Turkey or just oil? And is Azerbaijan's conflict with Armenia seen by Pakistan in religious terms, for example, right? So whoever of the speakers would like to comment on this question, you're very welcome to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I would like to start it from the last question about Pakistan issue. The Pakistan, it's like friend Azerbaijan and Turkey, but via Turkey with Azerbaijan. But it's very strange because Turkey recognized Armenian as an independent state and Pakistan didn't recognize up now. It means he more friend that Azerbaijan and Turkey. Like because in Azerbaijan and Turkey recognize Azerbaijan as a state, but Pakistan up now didn't recognize Armenia as a state. It's very strange situation in terms of Pakistan because we don't have like historical problems, etc., etc. And Pakistan also involved in the last war against Armenia using the sending soldiers or mercenary or weapons, etc. The second question about collective memory about Ukrainian, Azerbaijan, and the Turkey, I can say that with Ukrainian, Armenia had a lot of shared history of memory from the Middle Ages, and the Ukrainian, it was recognized, this heritage, Armenian heritage, etc., etc. But the relation with Azerbaijan based, Ukraine-Azerbaijan has close relation as a France, because but it's not shared on the memory. Based on the memory, it's based on the political issue because after the collapse of Soviet Union, such as some country like Azerbaijan, Ukraine had the other orientation, and always until this Ukrainian war also, Ukraine was with Azerbaijan against Armenia in political of terms and about political territorial integrity, etc., etc. And that's why the memory with us are Ukrainian, Armenian, yes, short memory, but it's not using as a political because the policy based in the other interest, Azerbaijan, and that's why the Turkey, the case of Turkey, it's related on the policy and the shared memory with Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan using Turkish past also. And because Azerbaijan didn't involved in the Armenian genocide, but Azerbaijan one the country who was denialist policy as a part of state ideology, even more than in Turkey. I think, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Arsen. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on that? I don't see any hands or I don't hear any voices. So probably, Małgosia, you can have your pending questions if you have any.
Okay, yes, thank you. I will ask this question in English to Ilya Kononov. So I really enjoyed your presentation because of the theory of field you employ in this analysis. So this is also very close to like my understanding of memory very often. And you mentioned the field of production of memory in Ukraine. What other actors you identify in this field of production? So are they governmental organizations, non-government organizations? And specifically what I'm interested in is education, how this either like reproduces the doxa in the field or how it changes over time.
Ну, дійсно, це парадоксальна ситуація. І українська громадськість з тим, що доксою є от прагнення до Євросоюзу, пов'язує можливість зміни в політиці історичної пам'яті, тому що між правою орієнтацією і прагненням до Європейського Союзу якось виникає такий когнитивний дисонанс. Але ну, от таким чином наша історична пам'ять зараз і існує, на жаль. Тому що саме це поле втратило автономію і от в такій ситуації воно і опинилось.
Okay, Małgorzata, shall I translate, right? So Professor Ilya says that it is a really paradoxical situation and that Ukrainian society connects changes in historical memories with the joining of Ukraine to European Union, and unfortunately, this is how it works now. Пане Ілля, можете повторити, будь ласка, останнє речення, що це поле?
Воно стало гетерономним, тобто втратило свою автономію. І, на жаль, от воно в такому розірваному стані і існує, поєднуючи суперечливі складові.
And yes, this field has become heteronomy, and it has lost its autonomy its autonomy.
And what is the place of schools in the field in Ukraine, in the field of memory production?
Мені важко говорити про всю школу. Для цього треба спеціальне дослідження. Школа, ви, мабуть, знаєте, що закон про освіту у нас ліквідував всі школи, які працювали не українською мовою. Зараз тільки українська мова викладання. Ну і, відповідно, переорієнтація і у відповідності до сучасних тенденцій. В першу чергу, це викладання історії. Історія викладається націоцентрично в Україні. Тому так і формує уявлення про історичну пам'ять.
So it's hard to say about schools, and this question needs more research. But as you know, that the law about education actually forbid all the languages or education in other languages in Ukraine. So education in Ukraine is only in Ukrainian language. And in such a way, it started reorientation of this field, and especially history is taught in such a way that it is nationally centered, and well, that's how it forms this historical memory.
Okay.
That's how the school forms the social memory.
Okay, дякую, thank you very much.
Thank you. And we still have room for one last question, I believe. So if there's anyone willing to take the floor, you're very welcome to do so. Can you see your voice? If not, I have my last question to Mudassir, but maybe
I also have a question to you.
Okay. Mudassir, I have this question about the politics of memory, contemporary politics of memory of the Taliban government towards the US intervention. Can you say anything about it? I mean, I'm particularly interested in the concept of terrorism, or the concept of terrorists, like how the contemporary memory politics of the Taliban respond to this the concept of war on terrorism that has been present in the public space of Afghanistan for the last 20 years. I realize that it's a very fresh and complicated question, but maybe you have any insights on that. I would love to hear it if you have.
When after 9/11, Americans started their operation in Afghanistan. Initially, Taliban leadership, they surrendered to Americans, and they also surrendered to Northern Alliance with the commitment that there would be no action against them, and they will not be treated as a prisoner of war or like that. But when they surrendered, after that, Northern Alliance killed most of the Taliban leadership who surrendered to them. And till 2004, Taliban remained silent. They didn't started their insurgency campaign in countryside, but since 2004 they started collecting together, and in that collection, Haqqani Network, which is the alliance of Taliban, with other jihadi group. They started recollecting the memory of Mullah Omar, and they also presenting that memory to new Taliban jihadis, that this happened in 1990s, this happened in 1980s. Now again Americans are here, so we were able to push back British, we were able to push back Russians, and now because of our past experience and the memory of jihad which we are holding, we can now again push Americans. And since 2006, when Taliban started their large-scale offensive from Helmand, and they started moving towards Kabul from 2006, this framework became a kind of recruiting slogan that we were able to push back British, we were able to push back Russians. Now we can even push back US. And the jihad which we did against English was not that mighty jihad, but the jihad against Americans would be more holy, and it will bring more fruits. So the politics of memory ultimately help them to not only recruit, but also to provide a sort of self-motivation and actualization framework to the Taliban warriors that they can do this as they were able to do it in the past. So if you want to relate politics of memory with terrorism, that can be provided with the frameworks like politics of memory framework, particularly when we will talk about history and the cultural aspects. From there we can draw similarities, discourse similarities for terrorism. So it is possible, and no work has been done in this area, so gap is remaining.
Okay, thank you very much for this response. Okay, so since we can't see any other voices, I think it's time to finish our discussion. A fruitful discussion, I believe, although we are still far from reaching conclusions. It's really hard to do it in such a short meeting, but I believe, I feel that definitely in this discussion we made a step forward towards thinking about memory, politics, and war outside the nation state framings, right? These questions about regional and global processes that might be followed as similar in different contexts this remarks in this was very inspiring for me, and I believe this is the way we all would like to go, and I'm happy that we managed to make a step forward. So I thank you all the speakers for your presentations and for all your contributions to our discussion. Thank you, Svetlana, for a brilliant interpretation. Małgosia, would you like to add anything in the end?
No, just perhaps thank all the presenters for all the knowledge they shared, and all the research as well, how it's combined, like theories and practices and empirical approaches. So thank you very much for this interesting seminar. Thank you, Svetlana, for providing the translations, and Tomasz, thanks so much for co-hosting this event.
Thank you. Christina, would you like to say the last word?
Yes, I would like to, those who are still here and who haven't, to fill our online questionnaire, where you can also leave your emails if you want to stay in touch with us. So please do this for us, and come back tomorrow and the day after tomorrow if you can, for the other events that we have. You can have more information about this on our website.
Thank you very much. So see you tomorrow with some of you, and please follow us at disterman.eu. The project is ongoing until the very end of the next year. Like we're finishing December 2023.
January 24.
January 24. Yes, a lot of results and papers ahead. We're sure that you're gonna find interesting things for you. Thank you very much once again for your participants, and see you in the future. Bye.